Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. How were your workshops? Yeah? On a scale of thumbs up, I learned so much, to thumbs down, I didn't learn anything new. What would you rate it? All right, that's what I like to see. Awesome. All right, some in the middle, that's fine, that's fine. Cool, well, it is my pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you Drew Houston, the CEO of Dropbox, and Kristen Oheva, who will be our moderator. They'll talk to you all about what it's like to be a CEO of a company and what it's like to work in tech. And then you'll have the opportunity to ask them, Drew, some questions about him, about anything, really, I hope. So be thinking about what kind of questions you might like to ask in your head as they get the conversation started, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So without further ado, please welcome Drew Houston.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks, Drew, for joining us. I'm really excited to be here, just to be at this conference. It's really inspiring. Just as a woman in technology, it's just great to see things like this. And I have a younger sister, and I'm personally passionate about setting a good example for women in technology, or women who are aspiring to be in technology, and I know you're passionate about that as well. Yep. So thank you so much. Yep. So to start off with, for those who might not be familiar with Dropbox, can you explain a little bit about what is Dropbox? What does it do?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and congratulations to all of you. I hear it was a pretty competitive process to get here, and it's been fun. I saw some of the videos and some of the, and I've learned a little bit about some of the apps and teams you've done. But so Dropbox is basically an app that you can put on your phone or on your computer, or lets you have all your stuff with you wherever you are. So all of your photos, all your documents, basically all your stuff you can get to, we put it up in the cloud and take care of it for you. And more we're helping teams and companies and schools and all kinds of folks to work better together, to free people up to work from anywhere and make tools to make a variety of tools to make your life easier when you're working on things with other people. So that's a little, we do a lot of different things, but that's a quick summary.
Great. And so I'd love to start by learning a little bit more about you. So to rewind back a little bit in your life, before Dropbox even existed, when did technology first spark your interest?
So I was a really little kid. And when I was pretty lucky because my parents, I was probably 3 years old, something like that. And I, toddling into the living room, and I see this glowing screen and all these buttons. And this was very exciting for me. So I try to get up on the chair and I start mashing the keyboard, and I thought that was like the best thing ever. But then as I got a little older, I learned how to use the computer, and my dad is an electrical engineer, and so he started to teach me about programming when I was really little. And so the first thing I really wanted to do with computers was play games. But then I want to make my own games, and that's where programming came into the picture.
Do you remember the first game you ever built?
I remember the first program I ever wrote. I think it was pretty complicated. I think it asked, like, how old are you? And then I kind of went from there.
Yeah. All right, so what were some of your biggest interests when you were a teenager?
So as you can probably extrapolate. I stuck with computers, and when I was a teenager, I really, I still like playing computer games, but I was getting more and more into computer programming, and a lot of different interests. But I really loved math and science, and those are some of my favorite classes at school. And then more typical things, like all the activities you tend to have as a high school student. I was on the debate team, and we had just a whole variety. I wasn't really a great athlete, but that's okay. You don't have to be.
It's okay. And so one of my favorite stories about Dropbox is the story behind how you came up with the idea for Dropbox. I know Dropbox is something that I wish I knew about and used when I was in college. I really could have used it. So I would love you to share that story.
Sure. So when I just finished up college, and I had started my first company doing online SAT prep. And so if you don't know what the SAT is, you're going to find out. But it's a lot of work to get ready for it. And when I had to study for the SAT, you would go to this classroom, you get this like 800-page book. And I was like, this is really frustrating. There should be an online course that can learn, or that can adapt to what you need to learn, and it would just be a lot more efficient because you had to like hand grade your own tests and all these things. I could talk more about that company, but while I was working on that company, I had this other problem, which was I needed to do all the programming and I needed to do all the work. To build the company, I needed to use a bunch of different computers. And so then I had a problem because some stuff was over here and some stuff was over there. So like most people, I would carry around a thumb drive. And most of the time that worked okay, except when it didn't, because I would forget it. I would put it through the washing machine. I was always one step away from like total disaster. And then there was one day when I was going from, I had just graduated. I was living in Boston at the time, but a lot of my friends had moved to New York. And they're like, you gotta come here. It's really cool, like living in New York is great, you gotta come visit us. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can make it this weekend, I got a lot of work to do. But I thought, and I'm like, well, if I take the bus, then that's like 4.5 hours each way where I can get this done and this done and this done. And so, you know the gymnastics you do to rationalize these things. So I'm like, all right, well, I can convince myself that it was okay to go to New York. And so I'm like, oh God, the next bus leaves pretty soon. And I start rushing out, packing my bag and running out to the bus station. And I get there and I kind of elbow my way onto the bus. And I sit down and kind of relax. And I open my laptop. And I get this feeling in the pit of my stomach that something has gone horribly wrong. And what happened was, in my rush to get out the door, I forgot the little thumb drive. And I was like, oh my God, now and this was before the iPhone. This was like in the days where like if you didn't have anything to do, like you really didn't have anything to do. So I'm just sitting there, and you know how you like, I'm like still searching around my bag anyway to see if I knew I didn't put it in there. I knew I was just sort of sticking out the front of my other computer, but I'm like, oh God, okay, well. And I didn't say like, oh, I hate my thumb drive. I'm like, I hate myself. I'm so disorganized. I keep doing this. But after sulking for a few minutes, I was like, okay, I just never want to have this problem again. And so I opened up the editor and started writing some code to take care of this problem. And it was sort of the seed that eventually became Dropbox, although I had no idea about that at the time. But those first lines of code were written in the bus station on that bus. And then, you know, I would have had no idea that it would have turned into what it is. But I really just wanted to solve this problem for myself.
So in the time following that ride on the bus, could you have even imagined how that Dropbox would be used by this many people around the world?
So Dropbox is used by 500 million people today. It's a lot of people. And absolutely not. I would have been pretty excited if we had 500 people using Dropbox. But that's the thing. That's one of the amazing things about software is, you know, anyone, including everyone in this room, can sit down at a computer and have an idea and build it. And thanks to the internet and how connected everything is, if you build something good, it can take off or kind of take on a life of its own. And that's what happened with Dropbox. And in particular, what happened was this went from a problem that was pretty rare for people to a problem that everyone had as soon as they got a phone. As soon as they got a smartphone, because now you had a problem where it's like you have some stuff on your computer, some stuff on your phone, you need to move things back and forth, and Dropbox was kind of at the right place, the right time. This was a new problem that people didn't even know they could have, but then they found Dropbox and they were excited and they told their friends about it, and that's really the story of how Dropbox has spread from 2007 when we started 9 years ago to today, and that's kind of, so it's really, it's a pretty amazing time to be doing this, because like my parents could never, you know, even my dad as an engineer growing up, he couldn't have, he didn't have the same kind of tools that all of us do today.
Yeah, so when I started at the company, it was around 200 people, and since then it's grown quite a bit. And what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced as a leader, especially as the company's been growing?
So today we're about 1,600 people, and with offices all over the world. And a lot of the biggest challenges for me have just been, you have to learn on the job. So I didn't go to like CEO school. You just kind of get thrown in the deep end and have to figure it out. And you hope that you can learn what you need. You need to learn the skills faster than you just keep your head above water. And so that can be on the one hand, it's really interesting and exciting because you're always learning new things. But it's kind of stressful because you're sort of looking around and be like, I hope nobody realizes that I actually have never done this before, don't really know what I'm doing. But you smile and just act like you know what you're talking about. But after you do the job for a while and you learn and just keep that attitude, I think people will be surprised what they can learn over 5 years.
Yeah, so on the journey of getting to where you are now, I'm sure that you've had some ideas or projects that didn't quite work out. So can you talk a little bit about those failures and what you've learned from them?
Well, actually, there have been a lot. So my first company, the first investor in Dropbox is this group called Y Combinator. And so they fund all these little baby startups at the very beginning. And actually, that company, the SAT prep company I talked about, I applied for Y Combinator funding 2 years before Dropbox and was rejected, which made me really sad because I was really excited about Y Combinator. I had other friends who had gotten in, and it seemed like they were having a really great experience, but I got the rejection letter. But it was okay because had another idea, had Dropbox and applied again, and that time got in. And so you're not going to talk to any entrepreneur that didn't have some kind of failure at some point. But you have to see it as kind of a one step on the path because Bill Gates and Microsoft started a company doing software for traffic lights before he started Microsoft. Second one worked out a little better. Steve Jobs, his first company didn't really work. This is just, it's all in the game. Most companies do not work out the way that you want them to. So it's really about how many at-bats. It's really about how many swings you take. Unfortunately, whether you start one company or 100 companies, it only has to really work once. So you're not really judged by your batting average. You're judged by what's the best one you've done, which should be a relief to anyone who's worried about, what if I fail? Everybody fails. It's what you do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite things about Dropbox is that the leaders and the people, they really care about building an environment that's full of people from different places and different backgrounds, and the environment's very inclusive. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important for you to build a diverse and inclusive environment at Dropbox?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of reasons. So first is our business lives and dies by talent. And every great business lives and dies by talent. Talent is everywhere. And so it's really, that's why I'm really excited about things like this. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. I was lucky. I just walked in that living room and had a computer set up, and and my dad knew what to do with it and all these things. But some folks growing up don't have that opportunity when they should. And there's a lot of great people, a lot of people that could be great engineers, great founders, that don't even start. So that's one part of it. But it's really important to me to encourage and make sure that we're doing everything we can, whether it's me personally or Dropbox or the US, is doing everything we can to cultivate great engineers and great leaders. And the one way we can do that in the company is by developing people. But the other important reason why it's important to have a diverse and inclusive environment is because most of our users are not in San Francisco. We have all kinds of people using Dropbox, 500 million people around the world, something like 75% of them are outside the US, every imaginable background. And if you want to build products to support such a wide variety of people, you need to have a diverse set of those perspectives within the company. So those are a couple of reasons why it's really important.
Great. And so what do you think are some important things for young people to consider as they start to make decisions about going to college and entering the workforce?
Well, I think I certainly benefited from getting started early. You know, I first started programming when I was a little kid. Started my first company when I was 21. Had my first startup job when I was maybe 13 or 14, which we can talk about. That is like a huge advantage, and all of you in here have a huge leg up. Because if you want to be a great musician, it helps to pick up the guitar when you're 10, 15, 18 than if you're 20, 25, 30. And so that's like a permanent advantage that you can have. And so finding what you really enjoy doing at an early age is a huge advantage because I graduated college and I'd already had kind of almost 10 years of experience programming for startups. So I think that's something that is really helpful. And then the second thing is just like learning to work hard. I think one of the best things that, so I went to MIT, and MIT was a pretty intense place. I really liked programming, but it's going to a place like that is like, it's like, if you like cookies, it's like, all right, here, eat 30,000 cookies. It's like, they call it drinking from the fire hose. It's a little unpleasant, but it really forces you to work hard. And then, but building that discipline and learning how to work hard made pretty much everything after college seem way easier. And so I think the maximum level of like output or like amount of sweating and amount of work I had to do during those 4 years was probably higher than at any point in starting the company, maybe except for the first couple of years. So just understand the advantage that all of you have by starting early, and then also be patient, because going back to the music example, if people understand that if you pick up a guitar, you're not going to sound like Jimi Hendrix in the first 10 minutes. And they understand that if you want to be a doctor, you don't just pick up a scalpel and go to town, right? It takes a while to learn and train and everything. But for some reason, I think a lot of students and people get discouraged because they're like, oh, I tried public speaking and I sucked, so I'm just not good at it. Or I tried coding and it was hard and I didn't do a good job, so that's just evidence that I'm not going to be good at it. And the answer is like, yeah, not with that attitude. But it's really amazing what you can do if you have the mindset that you can grow, and if the mindset that you're patient with yourself and that it takes many years to get good at something, and to cut yourself some slack if you don't get everything right, because no one does. And that's something that I wish someone had told me when I was setting out to be a founder and setting out to be a CEO, because it's obvious, but like nobody is born a CEO. Like nobody comes out of the womb with like shiny hair and a Armani suit. Everybody has a job for the first time at some point, by definition. And that would have been really, it's sort of an obvious point, but I think it's something that's really important for everybody to understand, is that it takes, to learn something hard, it takes a while. And the one advantage, and if you look at the great tech companies that have been built, almost all of them have been founded and run by engineers. And they were great engineers first, and then they learned the business stuff on the job. And so if all of you are, hopefully all of you continue to be interested in engineering, but stick with it, become a great engineer, and then you have a ton of different options. I could talk more about why engineering is such an exciting place, but I think that's, but just that mindset of you can always, it takes a while to learn anything important, and always pushing yourself, and starting at an early age is like, you can have a huge advantage.
Yeah, so you mentioned starting early, and you mentioned that you had your first startup idea when you were 13 years old. Can you talk a little bit more about what that was, or what you were working on when you were 13?
Yeah. So I was, as I said, I was really interested in computer games, and that was kind of how I got my start with technology. And then I wanted to make my own games, and it turned out that was a little harder than I thought it would be, but I actually wasn't trying to get a job when I got my first programming job. What happened was I signed up to test this online game that was in development. And so it's called a beta. It was in beta. There may be a few hundred people invited to try it out. And I started playing it, and I got bored because the game wasn't done yet, and there wasn't really a lot to do. And so I decided to kind of poke around a little bit and look under the hood and try to see what makes this game work. And it wasn't just that. I wanted to give myself like infinite lives and give myself a little bit of an advantage in the game. So a little bit of misbehavior. But I looked under the hood and I found all these security problems, or all these design flaws that could let people do things that they weren't supposed to do. So I could do things like log in as the developers or the administrators and sort of like God mode and a little bit of shenanigans. And so then I contacted the developers. I'm like, hey, there are these problems here. You should fix them like this and this and this. And they're like, that sounds great. Do you want to do it? Do you want to take over the network code? And I'm like, sure. I'm in Boston. I'm not in Colorado, but I can work remotely. And they're like, whatever, that's fine. And so they sent me all this paperwork, and they gave me a bunch of stock options. Unfortunately, the stock options were never worth anything, and there's one of many experiences I've had with startups where stock options weren't worth anything, but we can come back to that. But anyway, so I'm like, all right, let's do this. I can work part-time remotely. I'm like, do you mind if my dad signs the paperwork? Because I was 14, I couldn't legally sign it, and they're like, what is going on here? But it was great because I got to work on. So it was my first experience building something and getting having something resembling a real job, and then that was, even though the game didn't really go anywhere, it was a great professional experience, and it was something on my resume that I could then use to get a job, another startup job that was a little closer to home. So that was my first real startup job experience, other than babysitting. But then I realized that programming you kind of do a lot better than babysitting.
Yeah, so last question before we cut to Q&A. I want to give the audience lots of time to ask questions. But for young people aspiring to enter the tech sector, what is some advice you can give?
Well, I think I've covered some of it. So first, starting early is a huge advantage. Second, be patient and realize it takes a while to get really good. And then third, I think it's incredibly valuable to do as well as you can in school and to get into the right college for you. But if you get into the habit of working really hard and becoming a great engineer, then you have a ton of opportunity after that. Because there are way more job openings for engineers than there are people to fill them. And engineering is becoming an even more interesting and exciting field because when I was in high school, the internet was really just used for a relatively small number of things. It was used like for searching for information or buying things online. Like those are new things. But it's kind of constrained to the online world. Now, technology is being used to reinvent just about everything, including all these industries that you would not think of as the technology industry. But if you think about it, like Uber is revolutionizing transportation. Right? Airbnb is going after hotels. There are all these, basically, farming is being reinvented by technology. Everything is being reinvented by technology, and the people that power that transformation are engineers. And it's a pretty awesome line of work because you can sit down, have an idea, and create something from nothing, and then fast forward. At Dropbox, we press a button, and all your code is in hundreds of millions of people's hands. That's a pretty cool thing. That's something that was not possible, even 20 years ago. And so but it's a lot of work, and and certainly if you go into the startup world, there's not everything goes as you want, but starting early, sticking with it, learning to work hard, getting the best school you can, those are some basic things that you can do to really put yourself in a good position.
All right, great. Thank you. And so I want to give a lot of time for the audience to ask questions. So, yep, go ahead and just state your name and where you're from and ask your question.
So starting a company is not very risky these days, and I'll tell you why. So I was shocked to learn that there was this place called California where they had more wheelbarrows of money than engineers to push them around. So what I mean by that is Arash, my co-founder, and I, we were 22 and 24. We go into a venture capitalist office, and we had no money, no experience, no connections, but we had this prototype for Dropbox. And we got there on a Friday. We had just moved from Boston to San Francisco. And on Monday, we had a handshake deal where they were going to give us $1.2 million. And then the following Monday, I'm waking up in the morning. I'm like logging into Bank of America, and I'm hitting refresh over and over and over again. And then our Bank of America, our checking account that we opened in the mall went from $60 to $1.2 million and 60 cents, or $1.2 million and $60. And I was like, oh my God, this really happened. So there's actually a lot more capital, a lot more money and investors looking for great engineers than there are engineers with good ideas to do startups. And so that's pretty different than what people think, because people think it's a very risky thing, or I got to take out a bunch of debt, or max out my credit cards. That's just not how it works anymore, because people realize that the scarce thing is engineering talent. It's not money. There's a lot of money floating around because these technology companies can become very valuable really quickly. And then the second thing that people misunderstand is that worst case scenario, you build something, and even if it doesn't work at all, that's a great experience. Like tech companies you'll be more attractive for that, not less. And so, whether that's companies like Google, Facebook, Dropbox, whoever, we will pay more for people with that experience than people who don't have that. And so you have a pretty good safety net if you're an engineer, because your worst case scenario is you work on a company for a little while, doesn't work out. Investors will still continue to fund your next idea as long as you're honest and work hard. And even if you don't want to start a company again, even someone out of school can make hundreds of thousands of dollars, or a couple $100,000 just after graduating, which is pretty crazy. That was not the case, 25, 30 years ago.
I'm Jennifer, and I'm from California, and I was wondering what your college major was and how that helped you in your career.
So my major in college was computer science. And it helped me because then really learning the craft of engineering and learning the math and learning kind of all the nuts and bolts made it possible to build something like Dropbox. Because the idea for Dropbox sounds easy, but is actually really hard to build, which is why it didn't exist before, and which is why we've been able to survive, even though companies like Google and Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, pretty much everybody's coming after us. But I wouldn't have been able to build Dropbox if I didn't really understand engineering. And so again, being able to start early, going to a school like MIT, and really learning engineering well set me up for being able to start the company. By proving them wrong. Prove them wrong. everybody has opinions, right? So actually, one thing that that most of the investors agreed on about Dropbox was that it was a bad idea. Why do they think it was a bad idea? Well, there were a lot of competitors. So it was 2006, 2007. There were actually like 100 companies, maybe not that many, but there were a lot of companies that on paper were very similar. And over the years, people had tried to solve this problem, and they had all failed for different reasons. So an investor looking at Dropbox is like, okay, here's storage company number 114. They're like, why are you working on this? No one, this never has worked. It's probably not going to work this time. Why are you wasting your time? And my answer was, well, I know there are a lot of other products around that are supposed to do this. And I asked the investor, I'm like, do you use any of them? And the investor said, no. And I said, isn't that interesting? So if nobody's really solved the problem, then it's still fair game for anyone. And what was really important was the timing, because, again, this went from a pretty rare problem to a problem that everybody had. But you just have to be used to people being kind of narrow-minded and not being, and sort of explaining all these reasons why your stuff won't work, or why. There's always a lot more reasons why something won't work than reasons something will work. And to this day, that continues. You know, people have written a lot of nice things about Dropbox, and people have written a lot of mean things about Dropbox, about how we're going to die, and Google's going to kill us, and it's never going to work, and our business is going to go disappear, and we've made all these stupid decisions, we've built all this stuff that doesn't work, and yeah, maybe we've succeeded so far, but we're not going to succeed anymore. Guess who else they write that about? Google, Apple, Facebook. They're like, Apple's over. They're not innovating anymore. And it's like, this is after, like, articles like that come out after an announcement that, like, Apple has just generated the most profit of any company ever in the history of the world. People still say that you suck. So you just have to get used to it and ignore them and prove them wrong. And because people that make a living out of just tearing other things down don't get very far.
My name is Diana, I'm from Moldova, and my question is, what's your favorite programming language and why?
So my favorite programming language is Python. Python is a great programming language. And one of the crazy things we actually were able to do was we were able to go find the guy who created Python, and he now works at Dropbox. Which is pretty cool. We grabbed him out of Google. Took some work. Took a couple years of kind of twisting his arm, but eventually we got him. And I love Python because it's really simple, and I think it's a language that everybody here could start using and could pick up. It's very elegantly designed. It's very expressive. It works across all different platforms. Dropbox is a big part of Dropbox is written in Python, and it's a big advantage because we could write the code once and have it, for the most part, run on all the different operating systems and platforms, which was a big speed advantage. I could go on about how great Python is, but that is my favorite programming language. Well, people love Dropbox, and we have, we were pioneers in the space, and I think when we talk to our users, so a lot of people use Google Drive too, and they use OneDrive, and they use all the different products, and different people make different choices, and that's kind of what business is all about. And not everyone will agree with us, but when we talk to our users, they're like, they love that Dropbox is simple, and that they never have a problem with it, they can trust it. That it works equally well across all the different platforms, that it's like friendly and pleasant. Those are some of the reasons that people use Dropbox. And our business has just been growing the whole time, even though we've always had competition.
Hi, I'm Laura from Tunisia, and I wanted to ask, how you guarantee your product will be successful for the next 10, for the long term? How you guarantee, especially with the competition coming?
Well, there are no guarantees in life. So a lot of this is hoping. and doing the best you can. But it's really about understanding what people want, and then it's understanding how do you get a group of people together to build products that solve their problems. And so as long as people have problems or needs, there will always be demand for ways to solve them. And so if you can make things a little more convenient, or you can make people a little bit more productive, or save them time, or any of the other benefits, then you can have a successful business. And what's great is the landscape is always changing, right? So and for example, that's why Dropbox was able to exist, is because 2007, the iPhone launches, and again, this problem that we solved went from something that only a few people had to something that everybody had. Because people might not pay attention to the fact that for every problem that technology solves, it usually creates a new one. For example, so Facebook comes out, all these people are putting all these photos in Facebook. Now you have a new problem because you're like, oh God, anything I put on some of these sites is going to be with me for the rest of my life. A company called Snapchat comes along. We're like, all right, our photos will disappear. Okay, now I can feel like I can share a lot more stuff. That was a problem that never existed. And so that cycle always keeps going. So I'm always thinking about, okay, what are the new problems that people have? And some of them are surprising. I don't think no one was waking up a week ago being like, man, I wish I could run around San Francisco collecting Pokemon. So there's always new stuff that, always new things new problems that you can solve for users, or new things that you can do to get people excited. I think you can start a company from anywhere, and that's one of the pretty great things about software is it doesn't, the editor doesn't care what country you're in. Your customers don't care what country you're in. All they care is that you built something for them that they need. And so I think that should be a relief that it takes a lot less money, a lot less resources. You can just all you need to get started is a PC and an internet connection to start a business. So it's a lot easier and a lot less expensive than it was 20 years ago. That said, there's value, I think, being in a place like this where there's a whole ecosystem of, you can throw a rock and hit 20 investors and 20 engineers, and everything you need is, there are startup centers like the Bay Area where you have a strong ecosystem that can help accelerate the growth of your startup. It's not all beneficial. That means there's a lot more noise, there's a lot more competition, it's a lot more expensive, it's harder to hire people. But I think on balance, this is a lot of companies, a lot of founders have found that places like San Francisco and the Bay Area are the best place in the world to start a company. There are many of those kinds of startup hubs. So I would suggest, all things being equal, to go to one of these startup hubs, and there are many. Because it makes it easier to hire people, and there's a lot of advantages. But if you can't do that for some reason, and I agree, I think we have the stupidest immigration laws in the world. This is something I care a lot about. We bring all these smart people into the US, we educate them, we kick them out, and then we invite them to come compete against us. It's really it's as if our competitors were writing our immigration laws. That's what we have. So that I think I really hope that at some point we can get that to a better place, because we really need all the talent we can get, or America does. But fortunately, even if you can't make it here, or even if the immigration system fails you, fortunately you can start a company from anywhere.
I think we have time for around two more questions.
everything has gone 100% as planned. So I'd say a couple things. So one is actually a lot of things, a lot of the product that we have is in a lot of ways pretty similar to the product we started with, which just shows how big of a problem this has become. And so it does help to have a plan and beliefs about, okay, this is where the future is going to go, these are the problems that our customers are going to have. But a lot of these, you'll make 10 of these assumptions and half of them or more will be wrong. And you'll launch a bunch of products and some of them work and some of them won't. So we've launched products. We canceled a couple of big things last year. We had an email product and a photos product, and they thought they were totally failing, but they weren't quite where we wanted them to be, but that's okay. Because you don't need 100% of things to work. Like even the successes more than pay for all of the things that don't work, and then your customers will tell you what they want, and so that you absolutely have to respond to feedback, change your plans as you learn more, and as the landscape evolves and your competitors do certain things. But that's also what makes it fun, is because everything's always changing. Yes.
Cool. You say you're an advocate for diversity in tech. One of the big issues women in programming face is the lack of role models. We're an event for young girls and women who are just getting into tech, and your keynote speaker here instead of featuring a woman. What are your thoughts on that?
I would love for there to be as many female engineers and founders as possible. I know I can't fit I know there's some things I can't really change about myself very easily. But I know you've had a bunch of other female founders here, and I think that's certainly why I'm here, because I don't think there are enough. I want there to be as many female founders, as many female engineers as possible. That's something I care about, something that Dropbox cares about. That's why we try to participate as much as we can, and at all levels, from school to helping make sure that we can hire female engineers and promote them into leaders, and that happens all the time within Dropbox. We have a lot of great female engineering leaders, but I agree with your point. I think we need as many female founders and female engineers as possible, and they do amazing things.
Right, one more question.
So I've gone through some of them, I think, around just learning as much as you can, getting an early start, and so on. I think a couple others, so keep in touch with everybody, look left and right, and keep in touch with everybody here. Because all of you are really motivated, and you're going to find out that this world is a pretty small place. And you're going to run into each other down the road. And as much as there are really great things about starting a company, it's really hard. And so having a network of people that kind of know what you're going through, I couldn't have built Dropbox and run it if I didn't have friends that were also interested in starting companies. And I commiserate with other tech CEOs. I mean, there's a lot of, as fun as it is, there's a lot of challenging things too. So, but building that network and just keeping in touch with people who are really motivated and interested in starting companies is valuable, and I would say just get started. You don't have to wait for the perfect idea. Join a startup. That's probably the single best thing after school. Right now, I would focus on doing well in school, but once you're done with school, the best kind of stepping stone to starting your own company is joining a startup, because that will help you understand what small companies are like, and allow you to learn a lot of things without having all the kind of weight on your shoulders, or without having to learn everything from scratch. So I had been involved in 5 different startups before Dropbox, and all that experience was really valuable, both because of the experience it taught me, but then also the founders of some of the companies I used to work for became mentors to me, and even invested in Dropbox. And so some of the money that we got to get started came from people who I had worked for, and who had believed in me, and who had helped me along the way.
Great. I think that's all we have time for, but thank you so much for allowing us to be here. I'm super honored, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Good luck.